Well, hello and welcome everyone to our ECPI University Healthcare Administration Alumni Panel. Thank you all for taking time out of your day to tune in. We hope that all of our healthcare administration students can get a small glimpse into what their future could look like as an ECPI graduate. We have two outstanding graduates joining us today to share their insights. Huge thank you to the both of you for volunteering your time to give back to ECPI. I'll tell you a little bit about how this is going to run. I will ask both panelists a series of questions about their careers and experiences at ECPI. Please, if you have any questions for them, write it in the chat and make sure to put who the question is directed to, and we will answer the questions at the end of both of the interviews. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Rachel Spivey is up first. Rachel graduated from ECPI in 2017 with her bachelor's degree in healthcare administration. Rachel, could you please introduce yourself and tell us what your current role is and where you work?
Absolutely. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Rachel Spivey. As Sarah had mentioned, I actually am a talent acquisition consultant and chief retention officer at Duke University Health System. At Duke, we want to make sure that all of our team members are retaining our talent. And so that's incredibly important to us. So I've actually been at Duke now for 2.8 years, to be exact. So just coming up on that time, and it's been just an absolute joy having made my transition from healthcare administration over into human resources and at Duke in talent acquisition.
Awesome. So let's go back to before you enrolled at ECPI. What made you make that decision to start your degree in healthcare administration specifically?
So I had been a hospital corpsman when I was active duty Navy, and I really enjoyed working in healthcare. But I also had an administrative and legal background. So I had actually worked for the district attorney's office in a small town in Northern California and had worked for a CPA firm. And I was kind of a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And I wanted to marry some of that experience. It just so happened that one day I was going in for an interview for another job. And they said, well, why aren't you applying for HR? And I thought, well, gee, I'd never thought of it. And so that started my journey in HR. And then I took that to ECPI. And I really wanted to bring those two components together. So I actually went and interviewed a number of different universities, sat down with different counselors, and I wanted to see where I felt the most comfortable, where I felt the most support. And that was ECPI at that time. And so from there, I talked about the healthcare administration program and got started from there.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about your career path from graduation into your current role. What were your different job titles, and where did you work, and how did you make those transitions from each position?
So it's called getting a foot in the door. Really taking everything that you've learned and really expanding on that, and taking all of the education as well as that experience that you've had and applying it to what you have now. So in that, I have done everything from administrative, working for a CPA firm, to working in HR. I have worked in the workforce doing in-store demonstrations, which is where the marketing background comes from. I have done all of the back store stocking, so I know the back end of that. So I think that makes me very relatable when it comes to working in the workforce. And then we also had, I also had that experience going into human resources as a clerk for SeaWorld Busch Gardens, and then coming to ECPI during that time, working both, working there and going to school. It's almost like you're working two jobs, it basically is. And then from there, I went to Eastern State Hospital for the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I actually became a recruitment operations analyst there, and I did just about everything. We worked with FMLA benefits, onboarding, recruiting, you name it. And then from that point, decided to make the jump to Duke, and I haven't left because it's been great.
That's great to hear. Thank you for that, for taking us through your journey. When you first graduated and you were looking at jobs, what helped you land your first job right out of college?
My work ethic, being able to really dig in and ask all of the questions, to be inquisitive, to take everything that I had learned and figure out how to apply it, make meaningful connections within the workforce. I was actually got my foot in the door working in timekeeping, actually, after having interned with the fiscal director. And that was such a great opportunity. And you wouldn't think that an HCA student would go into a fiscal direction, but there's so much more to HCA than just being the head administrator. You have all of the components that require the support for that individual and for all of the patients. And so I found it really interesting looking at all of the legal acumen and the legislative responsibilities and the financial responsibilities. And so I jumped from there, and they had a position open, and it wasn't the top position, but it was a foot in the door. And so I took it, working with someone who I had become to deeply admire as a professional, who had just been such a great preceptor, that I'd been paired with. And so I went from there. And but as soon as that HR position opened up, I left. I have to say, because I had such a great supervisor, I waited to the last day to apply. But I did make that jump back to HR, because I just love working with people so much.
That's awesome. Thank you. What were some like specific classes or features about ECPI that helps you in your career today?
Oh, what isn't? You know, I really think that everything plays a part in it. Even though you think of HR, when I'm talking with hiring managers, I know what the details are that they're speaking of. I know about the challenges that they're working through. I know about the quality perspective, all of the requirements that we have to meet each and every day, to maintain our, magnet certification, for example, like at Duke, and making sure that we're keeping in compliance with all of the policies and regulations on a day-to-day basis. All of those things are integral, and it's also very important when we're selecting candidates that we have that knowledge so that we can ensure that we're selecting the correct candidate to fill those roles.
Yeah, awesome. What's some advice you have to current students at ECPI?
I would say when you're making your transition from student into your current role, never get discouraged. There's going to be a lot of candidates out there, and never just take no, just keep applying. I think that's really one of the big things, is making sure that you are not only preparing yourself as a student for those roles, and really knowing what it is that you're studying. I think that's incredibly important, because if you can't have the conversation, you're not going to be selected. And when you are going up against a lot of different candidates, that makes all the difference in the world. You can have a degree from Stanford or wherever it is, but if you don't understand what the complications are and have reasonable solutions and have the kind of demeanor that they're looking for, that's going to be part of a cohesive team, then all is for naught. You're going to find a position that's maybe not quite what you had hoped. And so I would say keep out there and not only continue to absorb everything, but go out there and when you apply, just keep applying and putting your very best foot forward, especially in today's Zoom. Just because it's a Zoom setting, you don't want to trim your nails. You don't want to sit on your yoga pillow. This is a professional environment. And as odd as it seems that we shouldn't have to remind someone of those things, we do. And so if you come in prepared and you're ready to have that conversation and speak with knowledge that you've gained from your education, I think that you'll do very well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. I really appreciate all of your responses, and I know that a lot of our students can get a lot out of that, so I really appreciate it. We will go ahead and move to Katrina Garcia. She is our third panelist here today. Katrina was a 2020 Bachelor's in Healthcare Administration graduate from ECPI University. So Katrina, can you introduce yourself and tell us where you work and what your role is?
My pleasure. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to be here. And along with the panelists, it's a pleasure to hear you guys. So I am currently the Director of Compliance and Onboarding for Emonix. It's a healthcare staffing agency. And as all of you know, in healthcare, due to the pandemic, healthcare staffing agencies really have zoomed in and tried their best to fill in the gaps in this pandemic of lack of nurses and healthcare providers from even the environmental specialists. So I have been with Emonix for about 6 months, and my role is quite complex. I kind of have my hands in a lot of pots because I'm so passionate for healthcare. But my goal is to always ensure that the organization is in its best position ever, from ensuring that we are compliant with federal laws, state laws, our clients, which are the hospitals. In other words, think of a healthcare staffing agency kind of like the middleman from the hospitals looking for 100 nurses to fill in their gaps. We're there to help them with their staffing needs. So I have to make sure our company is complying with their rules as well internally, and then joint commission. And in addition to that, my responsibility is to ensure that all those employees, those workers that we're hiring, they're starting on time. And I know it sounds pretty oblivious, like, well, yeah, you hire someone, they're supposed to start, which is interesting. And I can imagine some of you guys here probably know about it. It's been so competitive in the healthcare field these past couple of years. So to get them to start is a challenge in the healthcare admin field. So I'll pause right there for your questions.
Okay, awesome. So you said you've been in this role for 6 months. Let's go back to before you enrolled at ECPI. What made you want to pursue healthcare administration specifically?
I've been in healthcare for 10 years at that time, and I was working as credentialing coordinator in a mental health hospital for about 6 years almost. And I realized that I want to go to the next level. I really want to elevate my skills. I want to elevate my knowledge and really be a person in a position where I can make decisions and put everyone around me in a better position, from the employees, from patient care to the organization. And I realized about 6 years I was there that I was feeling very stagnant. There was really nowhere to go. And even though I never sat still, I would even go to the accounting department, which definitely not in my scope, but I was just so curious about about contracts and how do we get our payments from the state, because we were a gosh, I can't forget the word right now. We nonprofit organization, sorry. So what I was always investigating everything and connecting the dots. So one day I was at my little cubicle and I just thought, what's the next step? And I promise you, my cousin and I were texting that day. I'm in Orlando, Florida. She's located in Virginia Beach. And she said, why don't you look up ECPI? Get your healthcare administration degree. Like, really look them up. I had a few friends that went there. And I promise you that day I signed up for information. And I think like 2 or 3 weeks later, I started school. So that's my journey. And honestly, I say that was my milestone to where I'm at today. Like that will be the moment when I'm a grandmother, great grandmother, I'll tell my kids, school is the way to go. Let me tell you my story.
I love that. Thank you for that answer. Let's talk about your career path. I know you talked about your career path before you enrolled at ECPI, but when you first graduated, what was your first role after you graduated and how did you get that role?
Compliance manager. I was about to graduate from my bachelor's degree. I think I only had maybe 3 or 4 months left. And again, I was feeling stagnant. Every day I was kind of bored. I have to admit, I was bored at work, where even the work that I asked people to take over, I was doing it. I was even doing my work while I'm at the job. And I was on LinkedIn, which I recommend everyone to get on. I was on LinkedIn and I saw credentialing manager. I applied for it and I received a call that day.
Wow.
And so I became a compliance manager maybe a few months before graduating. I stayed with that company for about 2 years. However, I was promoted from compliance manager to director of quality assurance a little less than a year from starting.
Okay. Why do you think you got that promotion? Like, what's some advice that you can give to someone who they get their first job out of college? How do you progress? How do you get up that promotion?
I do think everyone's story is different.
Mhm.
I would say the key to my success is be ambitious. Don't be scared to fill in the gaps. And that's what happened. I was hired to be compliance manager and I was filling in the gaps. And when I saw there was really no work or everything that they expected me to do, I would text my boss and say, what can I do for you to make your day easier? And I just started connecting the dots. And in a healthcare staffing world, right, our goal is to recruit quality candidates. And I noticed that there was some gaps from our recruiting team to compliance. Like, not to bore you guys with the details, but there was just so many gaps. And that's where behind the scenes, without my boss knowing or other managers knowing, I was connecting with employees like, let me help you. Let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. And that's what led me, I believe, to that promotion.
That's great advice. So what were like the specific classes that you took here at ECPI that you still use today?
I have a few. So for example, I have about 10 years of experience of working in a mental health hospital. And I'm very limited of the spectrum of healthcare. So the classes that I was talking about, the continuum of healthcare, from the case managers to the facility to aftercare, that was so interesting to me because I really just had a one scope mindset. Mental health, to me, everything was related to it. And I use that to this day in a healthcare staffing industry. We work with so many people from ICU, ER, long-term care, CNAs. So now, because of those few classes from ECPI, I can visualize what are they responsible of, and not just their like day-to-day task, but the little task behind the scenes, from note taking, relaying information to the doctors, to the case managers. There's just so much work to it. Additionally, because this was during the pandemic, I was in I forgot the name of the class. It was like a healthcare disaster preparation class. I don't remember, but it was so crucial for me. And I still use it today because it taught you as a leader to remain calm. In other words, when there's a disaster, and how us as leaders, it's up to us to create that calmness when there's a storm coming.
Yeah. Awesome. So I just noticed that the chat was disabled, but the Q&A is open. So if anyone has any questions, there's a Q&A bubble at the bottom. So if you just click on that and write in a question, we'll make sure that gets answered. Sorry, Katrina, I just wanted to make sure they knew that before you wrapped up here.
It's okay.
What about like features of ECPI? Like we have a pretty unique schedule and a unique way of getting your degree. What are some of the features that ECPI offers that you think is helping you in your career?
So I did see in the chat if I did, or if any of us did decide to continue our education. I did decide to continue with my master's. Literally, I graduated, I think, in December. I started school like 2 weeks afterwards. I just wanted to continue the momentum. And sincerely, there was such a huge difference from ECPI to the master's program, because ECPI was flexible. There was no mandatory group projects and mandatory meetings. And while working at the compliance manager role, I was still able to balance work, school, and personal life. And you're always going to feel overwhelmed, but I truly never felt overwhelmed where I'm like, how am I going to do this?
Yeah.
But in my master's program, there was a lot of mandatory group projects and meetings, and tell you the truth, it was so difficult, very difficult. To this day, I promise you, I'll talk to some of my friends from that class and I'm like, can you believe we did that? Like, how did we do it, especially us who are parents? So hopefully that answers the questions.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Katrina. I appreciate you giving that. Oh, one last question. What's your advice to current students who are in your program? Like, what's some good advice that you can give them to either motivate them through their degree or for their career life afterwards?
Don't give up. We're all going to go through stressful moments in life, whether it's school or it's going to be stressful when you're going to be passed on promotions. And just get it done. Because sincerely, I would say finishing school and where I'm at today, those sacrifices, I don't even remember. Like, think of what you're going to do once you graduate and you're in that role that you want to be at. You're going to be that mentor you always wanted to be. And if you're looking for something to motivate you, I would say give yourself like a me gift. Like, if I graduate, I'm going to New York City for the weekend, Europe, whatever. And that's what helped me. I always say, if I graduate, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to treat myself. And it was just one of those little motivators I had.
I love that very specific advice. I always love when someone has like very tangible things to give advice to. So I really appreciate that. Hopefully that helps some people with their motivation and inspiration to get through the program and keep their head on when they're in their career. So awesome. Well, thanks so much, Katrina. So we do have some questions in the chat. Looks like, well, the first one was continuing education, which we answered. The second one is, did either of you utilize the career services department when you graduated?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Rachel, did you?
I did, but ultimately it was my internship that gave me the opportunity.
Okay.
Once I did my internship, my preceptor wanted to make sure that I was hired into a position. And so I just went straight from my internship into a position, literally, like Katrina said, a few weeks later. I think I graduated, on the 17th or something like that. And I was hired on Christmas Day.
Wow.
And that was the only reason I had to wait, was that was the onboarding cycle day. So
Yeah. Awesome. Someone else asked, what types of jobs should they look for when they're graduating? I know that probably depends on what specialty you want to go into within healthcare administration, but what were some of the job titles that you guys were looking for?
With me, I had an immediate interest in finance. So that's kind of the route I took. I didn't want to be an accountant, but I like that finance aspect of it. But it's all depending on, what their preference is. And my advice is do something you have a passion for. You don't want to be miserable in a job and be stuck in a career path that isn't your passion.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Tiffany. What about you, Katrina? What were the job titles that you were looking for?
I've been in credentialing more or less for 10 years. So, LinkedIn. Honestly, LinkedIn will be your best friend. Sorry. So what I did, it was on my lunch break. I literally just searched jobs credentialing. And you can play around with it where remote, on site, the salary range. So even from there, so let's just say credentialing, anything related to credentialing will pop up, from HR to compliance. And what I recommend as well, if you are new, like if you went straight to school with no healthcare administration background, I do know that there is a externship. Shadow as much as people as you want. Also, what I do recommend is continue whatever you're good at. If you like genuinely have a little ounce of like you like doing this, continue. And I promise you, doors will open.
Awesome. What about you, Rachel? What were the job titles that you were looking for when you graduated?
HR.
Yeah.
I loved working in HR. I thought I was going to go into finance because I really enjoyed that. But I really just loved people, I think, too much. And so I decided to continue in the HR direction, because I found it was meaningful to be able to be in a position to help people and to help an organization be its strongest.
Awesome. All right. We have another question. Any specific advice for a job interview? Like, what would be your advice for a job interview, Katrina?
Study the company,
Mm-hmm.
go on their LinkedIn, and I'm telling you, play Nancy Drew. Look at their managers, the people, how long they've been there for, and make sure, for what I do, I try to make sure their vision really matches to the culture that I'm seeing on LinkedIn. I even look at their comments. Like, I want to see if the people are supporting each other in their comments. And additionally, get in the mindset that you are valuable, that it's a partnership. As much as that they want to hire you, you want to hire the right company that's for your needs. And for example, for me, the salary negotiations are probably like the most toughest part.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do recommend is look on YouTube. There are some really good resources there that would teach you how to negotiate, how to answer questions. And what I do personally, even though I look at myself as a confident person, I will look at my notes before an interview. This is how I would answer. This is what I do. Even though I know what I do, sometimes I'll have to review my notes because, especially for myself, I work remotely now for almost 3 years. I have the habit of getting too informal. I say like filler words and I'll talk a little slang. So that's why I say, like, before an interview, like, get dressed up, get in the mindset that this is not your colleagues that see you in your PJs, but an interview.
Great advice. Oh, this person said this isn't a question, but this Zoom has helped her so much. and answered so many questions. So that is always really great to hear. So thank you for putting that insight in. Well, I'm really happy that we all got together for this panel. As we've seen, like, it's made a difference in at least one person, and that's all we could really hope for, was that this current ECPI students that are studying the same programs that you guys did get a lot out of this and get some insight, motivation, and inspiration to continue and to thrive in their careers. So thank you all who joined this evening, and a special thank you again to our panelists. I really appreciate your time, and I hope everyone has a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.